The Hall of Choosing was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy, and Marcus Cole felt like he did not belong there at all. He stood in the observation gallery with the rest of the Earth diplomatic team, watching the ceremony unfold below them like something out of a fever dream. The hall stretched for what seemed like forever, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light in colors that human eyes could not properly name. Thousands of beings from dozens of species filled the lower levels, their bodies ranging from humanoid to something that looked like floating geometry made of pure light. At the center of it all sat the obsidian throne, and upon it rested Queen Cirith Anna of the Valkyrie Dominion. Marcus had read about the Valkyrie before coming here, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of seeing one in person. The queen stood nearly 8 feet tall, her body elegant and powerful at the same time, covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue with every movement. Her eyes glowed with soft golden light, ancient and knowing, and when she looked across the hall, Marcus felt like she could see through walls and flesh and bone right down to the soul. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt, and terrifying in a way that made his legs want to run. "The choosing happens once every 100 years, whispered Dr. Sarah Chun, the lead diplomat standing next to Marcus. "The queen selects a consort from among the elder races, and that species gains special favor with the Dominion for the next century." "Why are we even here then?" Marcus asked quietly. "Humans have only been in space for 300 years, and we barely matter to anyone out here." Sarah shrugged her shoulders and said that they had received an invitation like everyone else, and that it would be rude to refuse below them. The ceremony continued as ambassadors from the great powers of the galaxy stepped forward one by one to present their candidates. The architects of Throne 7 came first, their bodies made of living crystal that sang with every movement. They presented a warrior who had conquered 3 star systems and whose crystalline form had been sculpted into perfect beauty over thousands of years. The queen looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head once, and the architects were treated with barely hidden anger on their geometric faces. Next came the mind weavers of the Nebula Concordat, beings of pure psychic energy that floated like ghosts made of starlight. Their candidate was a philosopher who had spent 10,000 years studying the nature of consciousness itself, and whose mind was said to contain the collective wisdom of 1,000,000 generations. The queen closed her eyes, as if listening to something only she could hear, then opened them and shook her head again. The mind weavers flickered with confusion and withdrew one by one. The elder races presented their finest, and one by one the queen rejected them all. The Ashiri brought an immortal admiral whose ships had defended the galaxy from 3 separate extinction-level threats. Rejected. The Kovati brought a geneticist who had cured diseases that had plagued 100 worlds. Rejected. The Dramari brought a poet whose words were said to make stars weep. Rejected. Hours passed, and the tension in the hall grew thicker with each rejection. Marcus watched with growing unease as whispers spread through the gathered crowds below. This had never happened before in the 12,000-year history of the choosing. No queen had ever rejected every candidate from the elder races. "Something is very wrong," Sarah muttered beside him, and Marcus could only nod in agreement. Then the queen stood from her throne. The hall fell instantly silent, every being frozen in place as those golden eyes swept across the room. She descended the steps of her throne slowly, her movements graceful as flowing water, and the crowds parted before her like she was a blade cutting through silk. She did not look at the rejected candidates. She did not look at the ambassadors or the nobles, or the military commanders who filled the lower levels. Instead, she looked up. She looked directly at the observation gallery where the minor species had been placed, the ones too young or too weak to matter in galactic politics. She looked at the humans. She looked at Marcus Cole, him, she said, and her voice rang through the hall like a bell made of thunder. For a moment, Marcus was certain she must be pointing at someone else. He was nobody special, just an engineer who had been assigned to the diplomatic mission. Because he was good at fixing things and staying out of the way, he had no special powers or ancient wisdom or conquered star systems. To his name, he was just a human from a little blue planet that most species could not even find on a map. But the Queen was climbing the stairs toward the observation gallery now, and every golden eye in her head was fixed directly on him. "There must be some mistake," he heard himself say, his voice coming out weak and small. The Queen reached the gallery and stopped in front of him. And up close, she was even more magnificent and terrifying than she had been from a distance. She smelled like ozone and flowers that had never grown on Earth, and her presence made the air feel heavy and electric. "There is no mistake," she said, and her voice was softer now, meant only for him. "I have searched the galaxy for what I need, and I have found it in you, but I am nobody," Marcus said desperately. "I am just an engineer from Earth. I have nothing to offer a queen." She smiled then, and it was the most alien and beautiful expression he had ever seen on any face. "You have everything to offer," she said. "You just do not know it yet." She turned to address the hall, her voice rising to fill every corner of that massive space. "I have made my choice," she declared. "This human will be my consort, and any who challenge my decision challenge the throne itself." Below them, chaos erupted. The architects were screaming in their singing, crystal voices about insult and tradition. The mind-weavers flickered with psychic outrage that made Marcus's head throb with sudden pain. Other elder races were shouting over each other in languages he could not understand, but the tone needed no translation. They were furious, they were afraid, and somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath all the shock and confusion, Marcus Cole realized that his life would never be the same again. The Queen took his hand in hers, her scaled fingers surprisingly warm against his skin, and led him down toward the throne behind them. The galaxy began to tremble. 3 months had passed since the choosing, and Marcus Cole had learned one thing very clearly. Everyone in the palace wanted him dead. He walked through the corridors of the royal wing with 2 Velkari guards at his back, their eyes constantly scanning for threats that seemed to come from everywhere. Just yesterday, someone had put poison in his food, and the day before, that an assassin had tried to slip into his chambers with a blade made of compressed light. The week before that, a bomb had been hidden in his clothing, and only the quick thinking of a servant had saved his life. "You seem tense today," said Captain Verith, the leader of his guard detail, her voice carrying a hint of dry amusement. "Someone tried to kill me with an exploding shirt," Marcus replied flatly. "I think I've earned the right to be tense." Verith made a sound that might have been a laugh among her people, a soft clicking in her throat that humans found hard to read. She was one of the few Velkari who did not look at Marcus with open contempt, and he had come to appreciate her steady presence in his chaotic new life. The palace itself was a maze of crystal and living metal that seemed to shift when he was not looking. Marcus had gotten lost at least a dozen times in his first month here, and he suspected the building itself was playing tricks on him. The Velkari could navigate it easily with some kind of connection to the structure that humans did not possess, which left Marcus feeling like a blind man stumbling through a world designed for those who could see. Today he was being summoned to the Queen's private chambers, which had only happened twice before since the choosing. Both times she had asked him strange questions about Earth and humanity, and then dismissed him without explanation. He still did not understand why she had chosen him, and she did not seem interested in telling him. The doors to her chambers opened as he approached, and Marcus stepped inside to find Queen Sirathana standing before a massive window that looked out over the capital city. The view was breathtaking. Countless towers of crystal reaching toward a purple sky. Ships of every design drifting between them like fish in a vast ocean. She did not turn as he entered. Her attention fixed on something in the distance. "Do you know what the elder races are doing right now?" she asked. Her voice calm and measured. "Plotting to kill me, I assume," Marcus said. And he was only partly joking. "Worse," she said, finally turning to face him. "They are plotting to kill me." She gestured to a display that flickered to life beside her, showing a map of the galaxy with dozens of points marked in angry red. "The Ashiri have withdrawn their trade fleets from Dominion space," she explained. "The Mindweavers have severed all diplomatic channels, and the architects have declared our choosing void and illegitimate." "Can they do that?" Marcus asked with confusion in his voice. "They can try," the queen replied with something cold entering her golden eyes. "But that is not the worst of it. Look here." She pointed to a cluster of red dots in a region of space labeled the Outer Reaches. "They are assembling a war fleet," she continued. "Ashiri carriers, Mindweaver destroyers, Architect siege platforms, all gathering in one place." "How many ships?" Marcus asked. His throat suddenly dry. 3,000 at last count," she said. "And more arriving every day." Marcus felt his legs go weak and he sat down heavily on a nearby chair without asking permission. "They are going to invade," he said, the reality of it hitting him like a punch to the stomach. "Yes," the queen confirmed. "They will come here. They will remove you from the palace. And they will remove me from the throne. And then they will divide the dominion among themselves like wolves tearing apart a carcass." "Then why did you choose me?" Marcus demanded, his fear turning to frustration. "You had to know this would happen. You had to know they would never accept a human as your consort." The queen was silent for a long moment, her eyes studying him with that unreadable ancient gaze. "Come with me," she said finally. "There is something I need to show you." She led him through a hidden door in the wall, down a staircase that spiraled deep into the heart of the palace. The air grew warmer as they descended, and Marcus could feel a strange vibration in the floor, like the heartbeat of something enormous. At the bottom of the stairs was a chamber filled with shelves that stretched up into darkness, each one packed with objects that glowed with soft inner light. "These are the royal archives," the queen explained. "The collected history and knowledge of my people going back 12,000 years." She pulled a glowing sphere from one of the shelves and held it out to him. "I want you to study these," she said. "All of them. Learn everything you can about the Valkyrie. Our history, our biology, our technology." "Why?" Marcus asked, taking the sphere carefully in his hands. "Because you need to understand what you are," she replied, and her voice carried a weight that made his skin prickle. "You need to understand what humanity is, and why I chose you." She turned to leave but stopped at the base of the stairs. "The elder races think they know everything about the galaxy," she said without looking back. "They think they have seen all there is to see, and that nothing can surprise them anymore." Her head turned slightly, just enough for him to see the edge of her smile. "They are wrong," she said, "and you are going to prove it." Then she was gone, and Marcus was alone in the archives with 10,000 years of alien history and no idea what any of it meant. But he had always been good at learning things, at figuring out puzzles that others gave up on. So he sat down among the glowing spheres and began to read outside the palace. The war fleet in the outer reaches grew larger by the day, and on Earth, in the halls of the United Nations and the chambers of the Earth Defense Council, urgent messages were being received about a human who had somehow become the most important person in the galaxy. They did not know what to do about it yet, but they knew they could not abandon one of their own, not even if it meant going to war with gods. The attack came without warning on a night when the three moons of the capital world hung full and bright in the purple sky. Marcus was deep in the archives when he felt the first explosion shake the palace, sending ancient artifacts tumbling from their shelves as dust rained down from the ceiling. He grabbed the edge of his shelf to steady himself as another blast rocked the structure. And then another. And then the alarms began to scream. Captain Verith burst through the archive doors moments later, her scales flushed dark with stress and her weapon already in her hands. "The rebel fleet has arrived," she shouted over the noise. "They hit our orbital defenses before we even knew they were coming. Someone betrayed us from inside the court. Where is the Queen?" Marcus demanded, fighting her way toward the heart chamber. Verith replied, "She sent me to get you. We need to move now." They ran through corridors that had become nightmares of flame and falling. Debris Velkari soldiers rushed past them, heading toward the outer walls. And Marcus could hear the sounds of battle growing louder from every direction. Twice they had to take cover as enemy strike teams swept through the halls. Soldiers in the crystalline armor of the architects, cutting down anyone who stood in their way. "They are not taking prisoners," Verith observed grimly as they watched a group of palace servants gunned down without mercy. "They do not want witnesses." Marcus realized with horror. They are going to kill everyone and blame it on something else. They kept moving, taking hidden passages that Verith knew from her years of service in the palace guard. The sounds of fighting grew closer and then faded as they descended deeper into the structure, heading towards something Marcus had only read about in the archives. The heart chamber. He had found references to it in the oldest records. A place of great power at the center of Velkari civilization. But the details had always been vague and, wrapped in religious language he did not fully understand. Now he was going to see it for himself. They emerged into a massive circular room just as the Queen arrived from another passage. Flanked by the last of her loyal guards, she was wounded. A deep gash across her shoulder, leaking blood that glowed faintly purple in the dim light. But her eyes were still fierce and her posture still proud. "You made it," she said to Marcus. And there was something like relief in her voice. "The palace is lost," Verith reported. "Enemy forces control all the upper levels, and our fleet has been scattered. We have maybe an hour before they reach this chamber." The Queen nodded, as if she had expected this news. "Then we have an hour," she said simply. And she turned to face the center of the room. Marcus looked past her and finally saw the heart. It was a sphere of pure light floating in the center of the chamber, pulsing with colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. The air around it hummed with power that made his teeth ache and his hair stand on end. 12,000 years ago, the Queen began, her voice echoing in the vast space. "My ancestors found this object buried in the ruins of a dead civilization. They did not know what it was, only that it had power beyond anything they had ever seen." She walked slowly toward the heart, and Marcus found himself following her without meaning to. "They learned to use it," she continued, "to draw on its energy, to enhance themselves. And with its power, they built the Dominion and rose to rule the galaxy. But there was a cost," Marcus guessed. Remembering fragments from the archives, the Queen stopped and turned to face him. And for the first time since he had met her, she looked vulnerable. "The heart requires a genetic template to function," she explained. "It rewrites our DNA based on that template, making us stronger and faster and longer-lived than we would be naturally. But the template degrades over time," Marcus said slowly as the pieces fell into place in his mind. "Each generation the copy becomes a little worse, a little more corrupted." "Yes," the Queen confirmed, and he could see the pain in her ancient eyes. "We're dying, Marcus, slowly but surely. Each generation fewer children are born, and those who survive are weaker than their parents. The elder races know." Marcus realized. "They can sense it," she agreed. "They can feel the decay in our blood, and they have been waiting for generations for us to finally collapse, so they can pick apart what remains. Marcus looked at the heart, and then back at the Queen. And suddenly, everything made terrible sense. "You chose me because of human DNA," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Your species is a miracle," the Queen said, with something like wonder in her voice. "In all my searching, I have never found anything like it. You adapt to everything. You survive everywhere. Your genetic code rewrites itself constantly in ways that should be impossible." She reached out and took his hand, her scaled fingers warm against his skin. "Human DNA does not degrade," she continued. "It evolves, it changes, it becomes stronger with each generation instead of weaker. If I can use human DNA as the new template for the heart, my people will not just survive. They will be reborn." Marcus stared at her as the weight of what she was asking settled onto his shoulders. "That is why you gave me access to the archives," he said. "You wanted me to understand. I wanted you to choose," she replied. "The heart requires a willing sacrifice. Someone who gives themselves freely to become part of the template. I could not ask that of you until you knew what was at stake." Above them, another explosion shook the chamber, and dust fell from the ceiling like snow. The rebel forces were getting closer. "What happens to me?" Marcus asked quietly. "If I do this..." The Queen was silent for a long moment. "I do not know," she admitted finally. "No human has ever merged with the heart. It could kill you. It could transform you into something else entirely. Or it could simply absorb you and leave nothing behind. But it could save your people. It could save billions of lives," she confirmed, "and change the future of the galaxy forever." Marcus looked at the heart, pulsing with its impossible light, and thought about everything he had learned in the past 3 months. He thought about the Valkyrie children he had seen playing in the palace gardens, fewer each year than the year before. He thought about the elder races circling like vultures, waiting to tear apart everything the Dominion had built. He thought about Earth, young and vulnerable, and suddenly caught up in a war it had never asked for. And he thought about what it meant to be human, to be part of a species that had never learned how to give up. "Tell me what to do," he said. The Queen looked at him with something that might have been love in her ancient golden eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she began to explain. The United Earth Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valkyrie home system, and Admiral Sarah Chun looked out at the battle raging before them with grim determination in her eyes. 200 ships. That was all humanity had been able to gather in time. 200 vessels against a rebel armada of over 3,000. The numbers were impossible. The odds were laughable. And every single human in the fleet knew they were probably going to die today. But Marcus Cole was down there on that burning planet. And humanity did not abandon its own, all ships. Chine spoke into the fleet-wide channel, her voice steady despite the fear she refused to show. "You all know why we are here. You all know what we are facing. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you we can win this fight." She paused, looking at the tactical display showing the swarm of enemy vessels between them and the planet. "But I'm going to tell you this," she continued. "For 300 years, we have clawed our way up from a single planet to become a spacefaring species. We have fought plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped us out. And we are still here." The fleet held position, waiting for her command. "The elder races think we are nothing," Chun said, her voice rising. "They think we are too young and too weak to matter. Today we show them what humanity is made of. Today we show them that we do not know how to quit." She drew a deep breath and gave the order that would send them all into hell. "All ships engage." The battle that followed would be remembered for 10,000 years. Human ships were smaller than their enemies, less armored and less powerful in every measurable way, but humans had never fought fair. and they had no intention of starting now. Strike squadrons dove into the heart of the enemy formation, targeting command ships and communication relays with surgical precision. When their missiles ran out, they used their ships as weapons, ramming enemy vessels at full speed and detonating their reactors on impact. The Ashiri carrier group broke formation when 3 human destroyers punched through their shields and self-destructed inside their hangar bays, taking dozens of strike craft with them. The Mindweaver destroyers found their psychic attacks useless against human minds that were too chaotic and too stubborn to be controlled. And the Architects, for all their ancient technology, had never faced an enemy that simply refused to stop fighting no matter how badly they were hurt on the planet below. Marcus waited in the heart chamber as the sounds of battle drew ever closer. The Queen had explained the ritual, a process that would take several minutes during which they both would be completely vulnerable. They needed time that they did not have. The enemy has reached the final defensive line, Voreth reported, a voice tight with strain. We have maybe 15 minutes before they breach this chamber. Then we hold them for 15 minutes, Marcus said, and he turned to face the remaining guards. I know I am just a human. I know most of you think I do not belong here, but I'm asking you now to fight with me, not for me, but for your queen and your people and everything the Dominion is supposed to stand for. The guards looked at each other, and something shifted in their eyes. This human who had been dumped into their world without warning or preparation, who had faced assassination attempt after assassination attempt without breaking, who had chosen to sacrifice himself for a people that had treated him with nothing but contempt. Maybe he was not so different from them after all. We will hold, Vareth said firmly, and the others nodded their agreement. Marcus grabbed a weapon from a fallen soldier, a pulse rifle that felt clumsy in his hands, but would have to do. Then let us buy our queen the time she needs, he said. The rebel forces breached the outer doors 10 minutes later, pouring into the chamber with weapons blazing. What they found was not a quick victory. Marcus fought like a man possessed, using every dirty trick he had ever learned and inventing new ones on the spot. He set traps with salvaged explosives, created choke points with fallen debris, and when his rifle ran dry, he picked up another from the enemies he had killed. The Velkari guards fought beside him with new respect in their eyes, seeing this human refuse to die over and over again despite wounds that should have dropped him. Behind them, the Queen knelt before the heart, her hands pressed against its surface as she guided the ancient power toward transformation. The light around her grew brighter and brighter, and Marcus could feel something building in the air like a storm about to break. An architect blade caught him across the ribs, and he fell hard, tasting blood in his mouth. The enemy soldier raised his weapon for the killing blow, and Marcus looked death in the face and found he was not afraid. He had bought the time they needed. Marcus, the Queen's voice cut through the chaos, filled with urgency and something else. It is ready, but I need you here, now. He did not know where he found the strength, but somehow he was on his feet again. Somehow he was moving through the enemy soldiers, dodging and weaving and taking hits that should have killed him. Somehow he reached the heart just as the rebel commander burst into the chamber with 100 soldiers at his back. Too late, the commander shouted in triumph. Surrender now, and we might let you live long enough to see the Dominion fall. Marcus looked at the Queen, saw her reaching out her hand toward him. He took it without hesitation. The moment their fingers touched, the heart exploded with light above the planet. Admiral Chun watched her fleet die around her, outnumbered and outgunned, but still fighting with everything they had. They had bought almost an hour, far longer than anyone had expected. But it was not going to be enough. Then something happened. A pulse of light erupted from the planet below, washing over the entire system like a wave. Every Velkari in the battle stopped what they were doing, their ships going still as something changed inside them. and in the rebel fleet. The human prisoners of war watched in amazement as their captors collapsed to the ground, their bodies glowing with inner light as their very DNA rewrote itself. The battle paused, both sides unsure of what was happening. Then the Valkyrie rose, and they were different, stronger, faster, their scales brighter and their eyes burning with new fire, and standing at the heart of the pulse, connected to every single one of them through bonds of blood and light, an impossible transformation, were Queen Sirithana and Marcus Cole, still alive, still together, and more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Marcus Cole opened his eyes and found himself floating in a sea of stars. He could feel everything, every Valkyrie heart beating across the galaxy, every pulse of energy flowing through the Dominion, every whisper of thought from billions of minds connected to the heart, and beside him, wrapped around him, merged with him in ways that went beyond physical touch, was Sirithana. "We did it," she breathed. And her voice was inside his head and outside it at the same time. "Marcus, we actually did it." He looked down at his hands and saw them glowing with soft golden light. His body had changed, becoming something between human and Valkyrie. His skin marked with patterns that pulsed like circuit boards made of living fire. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt more alive than he had ever felt in his entire existence. "The rebels," he said, suddenly remembering the army that had been about to kill them both. "See for yourself," Sirithana replied. And she showed him through their connection what was happening in the chamber below. The rebel soldiers were on their knees, their weapons forgotten on the ground. The transformation that had swept through every Valkyrie in the galaxy had not skipped them. And now they stared at Marcus and the Queen with a mixture of awe and horror. They could feel it. Marcus realized they could feel the human DNA woven into their very being, making them stronger and healthier than they had been in generations, making them something new. "The rebellion is over," the rebel commander said, his voice hollow with shock. "How can we fight against what we have become?" In orbit above the planet, the rebel fleet was in chaos. Valkyrie crews found themselves unable to raise weapons against the Queen who had given them a future, unable to fight alongside the elder race allies who had planned to carve up their civilization. Like a feast, one by one the Valkyrie ships withdrew from the battle, their commanders bowing to the transformed Queen through channels that carried not just words but feelings. Architects and the mind weavers and the Ashiri suddenly found themselves alone against what remained of the human fleet and a Valkyrie dominion that had just been reborn. They ran, their ships turned and fled into faster than light travel, scattering to the far corners of the galaxy like leaves before a storm. Admiral Chun watched them go with exhausted satisfaction, a ruined fleet holding position around a planet that pulsed with light like a second sun. They had won against all odds, against every prediction, against enemies that should have crushed them without effort. Humanity had won. 3 months later, Marcus stood on a balcony in the rebuilt palace, watching the sun set over a city that was being transformed just as surely as its people. Beside him stood Sirithana, her hand warm in his, the connection between them humming with shared thoughts and feelings. "The elder races are afraid," she said, and Marcus could feel the truth of it through their bond. "They do not understand what we have become, and what they do not understand they fear." "Good," Marcus replied, and there was a hardness in his voice that had not been there before. "Let them be afraid. Let them remember what happens when they underestimate humanity." She turned to look at him, her golden eyes meeting his, and he saw his reflection in them, saw the creature he had become, still human at his core, but wrapped in power that ancient civilizations had spent millennia trying to achieve. "You have changed," she observed softly. "We have all changed," he replied. "That is what humans do. We change everything we touch." She smiled at that, and he felt her amusement and her pride and her love flowing through the bond they shared. "The Council of Elder Races has requested a meeting," she said. "They want to discuss the future of galactic relations in light of recent events." "Recent events?" Marcus repeated with a dry laugh. "You mean the part where they tried to destroy your civilization and got their fleet scattered across the galaxy instead?" "Something like that," she agreed. "They are very polite about it in their official communications." Marcus looked out at the city below them. At the Valkyrie, who moved through the streets with new energy and hope in their steps. Children played in the gardens. More children than had been born in a single year for the last several centuries. The genetic decay that had been killing them slowly for 10,000 years was not just halted, it was reversed, and somewhere in every cell of every Valkyrie in the galaxy, human DNA was woven into the pattern, a permanent reminder of the species that had saved them from extinction. "What do you think they will do?" Marcus asked. "The elder races, when they realize what we have really accomplished here." Sirithana was quiet for a moment. "Considering the Valkyrie Dominion is now permanently bound to humanity," she said finally. "Our children will be hybrids, our culture will blend with yours. Our fates are tied together for as long as both our species exist." "That does not answer my question." "No," she agreed. "It does not, because I do not know what they will do. The galaxy has never seen anything like this before. Two species merging together by choice, becoming something greater than either was alone." She squeezed his hand, and he felt her certainty flowing through their bond. "But I know this," she continued. "Whatever they do, they will have to deal with us together. And together, we are stronger than anything they can bring against us." Marcus thought about Earth, about the little blue planet where he had been born, about the species that had spent its entire history fighting against odds that should have been impossible. Now that species was woven into the heart of the galaxy's greatest empire, bound by blood and light, and love to a people that would carry human DNA forward for 1,000,000 years. The elder races had wanted to crush humanity before it could become a threat. Instead, they had made humanity immortal. "Do you know what I love most about your species?" Sirithana asked. Suddenly Marcus looked at her curiously. "You never know when you are beaten," she said, and her smile was brighter than the sunset. "You face impossible odds, and you simply refuse to believe that you cannot win. It is the most human thing about you. And now it is the most Valkyrie thing about us." In the distance, a new star rose above the horizon, and Marcus knew without being told that it was a human ship arriving with the first official delegation from Earth. The beginning of a new era, a new partnership, a new future that no one could have predicted. He put his arm around his queen, and together they watched the star grow brighter. The galaxy was still trembling, but now it trembled with anticipation. Instead of fear, everything was about to change, and humanity, as always, would be right at the center of it all, not because they were the strongest or the oldest or the wisest, but because they were human, and humans never quit.